Hi, Alex. Hi, Nancy. So good to see you both.
Hey,
Hi, great to see
Jason.
you.
I am so excited because this is our first ever co hosted crossover episode with our very own Clean Beauty School show, which everyone should obviously subscribe to. And to kick it off today, we're going to talk about the future of beauty. And before we do that, let's hear, Nancy, about your past, specifically your journey into the beauty space.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to share. Something that a lot of people don't know about me is that I actually didn't start my career in beauty. I started my career in finance back in 2007, straight out of university. I went to the University of Virginia and I took a full time job in the commodities business at Goldman Sachs. And if you can recall, 2007, 2008 was a tumultuous time for the finance industry. It was the start of the financial crisis. It was just a crazy place to be starting a career. And, several months into the job, I realized that I wasn't really passionate about the work that I was doing, but I came out of school with a lot of college loans and I had rent to pay. So I just, kind of stuck it out like a lot of my other friends who were doing similar jobs were. And unfortunately, in 2010, I lost my mom suddenly. And it was the first time that I had lost someone so close to me. And for the first time, I realized that, life could be short and we really owe it to ourselves to pursue our passion and, make the most of the time that we have here. And in a lot of ways, I felt like I was working without passion. I was spending so much of my time doing something that I didn't necessarily love. And so I went on a soul searching journey to kind of figure out what I loved because I didn't know at the time. And during that soul searching journey, I thought back to the memories that I had with my mom. My mom was a doctor and a chemist. And because of her chemistry background, she knew a lot about how to emulsify oil and water and create textures. And growing up, we would go to our local health food store and buy all sorts of oils, butters, extracts, and take them home and literally transform them into these very clean but functional beauty products. And during the time that I was having that soul searching moment back in 2010, I thought back to how much I loved experimenting with ingredients and just creating products. And at the same time, I was starting to see the shift that was happening in the beauty space with more consumers becoming a lot more conscious about the types of ingredients that they were putting on their hair, skin, and body, but also how the packaging of those products was impacting the environment. And so that really became my stepping out point and inspiration for launching Briogeo, which is a clean, high performance hair care product line for all hair textures and types.
I love it. We have very similar backgrounds, although I was a decade ahead of you, and you got there a lot quicker than I did on the journey. It took me 10 years. You got there faster. You've mentioned the word clean, and clean in the context of beauty can be nebulous. And I'm curious, what specifically does clean mean to you? And what made you realize that the quote unquote clean space was your space for you and your brand?
Yeah, it's a really great question because as I'm sure you know, the word clean is not, FDA regulated and there's so many interpretations of what clean means. But when I was formulating for Briogeo for the first time, pretty much a decade ago, so much of what I wanted to do was to really kind of leverage the heritage of what me and my mom were doing in the kitchen, which was using these very pure, simple, raw ingredients and basically transforming them into these effective formulas. But I also knew that if I was going to start a brand, the formulas had to be shelf stable and they had to have really good efficacy, especially if I wanted to sell my products within the prestige market. And because I wasn't a chemist by background the way that my mom was, I ended up hiring a chemist to help me formulate. And during that time of thinking about the formulations, I also had to define okay, well, what does clean mean for Briogeo? So I really challenged my chemist to help me identify, what were the top most commonly used ingredients in hair care that had either been linked to skin, scalp, health, or environmental concerns. And so those 6 kind of commonly used ingredients that my chemist came back with were things like sulfates and silicones, parabens, phthalates, DEA, and synthetic dye. So that became our 6 free methodology, which really kind of sums up how Briogeo interprets clean as it relates to hair care specifically.
You mentioned sustainability in your answer earlier, and that is something that we care so much about at mindbodygreen and in our beauty point of view. So I'm always so curious about the future of sustainability in the industry. In what ways would you like to see sustainability become a bigger part of the industry writ large? And, what innovations are you excited about?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Well, I think that there's been a lot of progress in beauty brands' commitment to sustainability over the past few years. And to be quite frank, I think so much of that progress has actually been spurred by retailers' involvement in the mission. So, for example, at Ulta Beauty, they have their conscious beauty program, which really kind of sets out a criteria by which, brands are eligible to be part of that program. And I think by retailers kind of jumping on board and setting those expectations around what sustainability means, it's really helping to, I think, further the focus on how brands are starting to, establish their own commitments. So I think that's been a really, kind of powerful shift that's happened recently. But I also think that in terms of change and opportunity, I think a lot of brands inherently are focused on, okay, how do I make my packaging more sustainable? And I think that's incredibly important. But I do think that sustainability goes beyond just packaging. I think it's really taking the time to make sure that you're educating your consumers on the various ways to recycle components because there are different levels of how certain resins can get recycled, and you've got to make sure that you're doing it the right way to become impactful. So that's one of the things that we've done at Briogeo is we actually have published publicly, both on our website and social media, our recycling guides. But then I think also too, part of it is like really putting your money where your mouth is in terms of identifying organizations that have really strong commitments to sustainability or investments in wind power, solar power that you can partner up with, bring visibility to, potentially even financially support. So that's really kind of where I'd like to see things shift is obviously if focusing on packaging is really important, but there's still so many things that I think beauty brands can do beyond just that.
Sure. The clean and sustainable beauty space has come such a long way. It is certainly not a niche market anymore. However, in order for it to grow and even involve more people into the fold, you have to reach out and you have to engage the community and you have to engage the beauty audience out there. So I'm curious, how can the beauty industry be better about reaching out to the community, and how can the beauty industry be better about making sure that all voices are heard?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And, for us at Briogeo, social listening is something that we do. And we noticed that over time, we were getting lots of questions around like, well, what parts of the bottle are recyclable? Like, can I really put the sprayer in the recycling bin or does that require something else? So I think, you know, kind of doing the work to make things easy and digestible and to educate is really important. But I think also coming up with creative ways by which your community can involve themselves in your sustainability practices is also really important. So, an example of that is last year we chose to partner with a company that allows clients who are shopping with Briogeo to actually offset their purchase in terms of carbon neutrality and actually kind of choose where that investment of offset, what kind of projects that goes into. So finding unique ways to actually bring the community in and kind of participate and be kind of an active just voice in some of those decisions, I think, really creates an opportunity to engage on sustainability in a much deeper way.
In terms of sustainability, what's so exciting to us is it's top of mind for everyone. How can it not? And ultimately, I think change comes from the bottom up and consumers vote with their dollars. And those dollars are powerful and companies take notice, whether they're large or small, and they react. And I think what we're seeing is more and more companies are taking notice that demand and making changes that are better for the planet. With that said, we're mind body green. One word, not three. It's all connected. And so environmental impact, the environment in general, is directly related to our health and well-being. And on this show, on the Mind Body Green podcast, we spend a lot of time talking about our health and well-being. And we sometimes talk about beauty, but it's all connected. So I want to get your opinion here. I have to ask, how does beauty impact our health and well-being, or our health and well-being impact beauty?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, to answer the former, I personally my mantra is that, so much of feeling beautiful really comes on the inside. It's the work that we do on ourselves on a regular basis. It's how we talk to ourselves, how we eat, how we prioritize our self-care. So much of those practices become the foundation for building, inner confidence, and that inner confidence really resonates. And when you're confident, chances are you're more happy. And when you're more happy, you get more pleasure out of the things that you're doing every day. So therefore, you do a better job at them, whether it's work, whether it's relationships, whether it's how you interact with the world. So I think all of those things are very much intertwined. And, beauty too is very much a mindset. While I do love my beauty products, so much of it is again really investing in yourself and investing towards being the best version of yourself.
I love that. And something I know, Alex, you talk about on Clean Beauty School all the time, the skin microbiome. So many of our listeners are very excited about the microbiome, and science has come so far, and we're focused on our gut health, but hey, wait, our skin microbiome actually is much bigger than our gut microbiome, and they are interconnected. And so I think that, as we think about the relationship and why what you put on your body, on your dermis is important, come back to the microbiome.
Completely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm a big believer in, gut health and mental health. Long story short, but I, a couple years ago, did some real big investment in my just understanding more about my body and, doing some tests on, gut inflammation and understanding those markers. And for the first time, I realized that I had, a pretty significant inflammatory response to dairy and a few other foods. And when I became aware of that and started cutting it from my diet, I noticed profound changes both mentally and physically. And so that's where I kind of go back to really kind of investing the time to really understand yourself and the things that your body needs and perhaps doesn't need, and making sure that you're creating the discipline around that.
I love that. And I also think, it speaks to your bigger story about taking lessons from your grandmother
Mhm.
and the simplicity. If you think about diet, it's about going back to the basics and eating real foods, not processed foods. And you think about beauty and the parallels, labels that are cleaner, labels where there are ingredients you recognize. And, going back to your grandma, you were, in the kitchen making products with her, using them in your own brand and formulas, pulling whatever you could out of the cabinets. And it's kind of really cool because you've got your classic tried and true ingredients married with innovation. And so how do you find that balance between using, the tried and true and at the same time pushing for innovative, pushing things forward in a way that really hasn't been done before?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I think the response has many different answers, but I can kind of give you one example where, back in 2017, we really revolutionized innovation within scalp care. So we were really one of the first brands within prestige to offer a full assortment of premium clean scalp care products. But from an innovation perspective, we actually leveraged an ingredient that was really popular in skincare at the time, which was charcoal. And a lot of brands were using charcoal in the face mask as a way to kind of extract deep rooted impurities. And when you think about the anatomy of the scalp, it's very similar to the anatomy of the skin in terms of, the fact that it has pores and those pores can kind of, hold bacteria and gunk and stuff like that over time. But even more so, your scalp is in a lot of ways more susceptible to buildup than your face is. One of the reasons being that typically you're washing your face once or twice a day. A lot of people don't wash their scalp every day or their hair every day. Also, you're putting a lot of product, whether it's dry shampoo or serums on your hair, on your scalp, you're working out, etc. So when you think about the potential for your scalp to really build up a lot of these impurities, and the fact that historically we never really treated our scalp the same way that we treated their skin, that can obviously be problematic for a lot of people. So we were innovative in that we took a pretty simple ingredient, charcoal, but really kind of revolutionized it in a category that hadn't been, done before. So really kind of linking the connection between skincare and scalp care and really thinking about the skin on your scalp as the same on your face and making the connection and the education between, the benefits of detoxification and how that supports overall hair health, I think was a very innovative thing that we were doing at the time and are still doing.
So, coming back to the larger question, I think the clean beauty space is filled with excitement. There's so much innovation happening there. I'm curious in terms of product innovation, new ingredients, what are you excited about? What are you watching?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different things that I'm excited about, and when I think about inspiration for future innovation, it comes from so many different places. It comes from, white space opportunities that exist within hair. It's, perhaps even sometimes leveraging kind of relevant technologies from skincare and making them applicable to hair care. Sometimes it's even looking at the food and beverage space in terms of ingredient trends and, letting that kind of inspire some of the things that we're doing. So it really comes from a lot of different places. And, as we've grown the Briogeo team over the years, so many more people kind of participate in a lot of our innovation brainstorms. And I really love that. And in a lot of ways, too, our community participates in our innovation brainstorms because we're constantly hearing from the front lines on, the things that our community want that may not exist or may not exist in a clean format. And so,
What are some of those? I just have to ask, like, is there an example of somebody jumping in and or giving a comment and then it sparked something broader?
yeah, I mean, a lot of like, dry styling sprays, in order to get that like dry finish of a wet spray, you have to use an aerosol because it's the combination of the gases with the wet that kind of creates more of a dry finish. And that has been a challenging thing, but it's been promising to see a lot of the advancements within more complex componentry that allows you to get kind of the type of product distribution without the use of aerosol gases. So it's not completely there yet because a lot of those technologies still kind of dispense the product in a wet format. So, for example, say you just styled your hair and you have your nice wave look going on, and maybe you wanted to add a dry texture spray to it. Well, without having that dry finish, it's going to come out wet on your hair and it's basically going to like ruin your style. So there still are challenges around certain packaging types that allow you to create a more sustainable application for a styling finished look. But there have been a lot of advancements and things on the way that I think are really promising.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And I know hair care has a very challenging sustainable packaging. There's a few challenges there that I know that hair care is unique in. And I know that sprays tend to be top of the mind on that. In what ways do you push sustainability forward in packaging in that way? Are there innovations on the horizon that you're excited about? I know you just mentioned a few with aerosols.
Yeah. So from day one, Briogeo has always used post consumer resin in all of our shampoo and conditioner bottles. And over time, we've actually increased the percent in our bottles as, more kind of advanced technology has allowed the ability to do so in a way that, basically supports the type of packaging aesthetic that you want. So, for example, again, PCR is a term that's used. It stands for post consumer resin. And basically, the way that you get that post consumer resin is, for example, you can take a recycled milk jug and you can grind it down into bits and then use that recycled resin, incorporate it back into a new bottle. But oftentimes during that process, it's not totally a clean process, meaning the cap to that milk jug may be red, and that gets kind of broken down in the PCR process. And if you have a white bottle, you may have kind of red specks in it, or black specks, or green specks. And sometimes it's hard to, at least historically, kind of create that uniform aesthetic. Or maybe the bottle's not white, it's kind of grayish because of some of those impurities. And I know that, at least since back in 2013, when we were using PCR, I mean, we used to have specks and discolorations in our bottles over time, but I think the sorting and the mechanisms by which that PCR is derived has become a lot more sophisticated, which is great. And so, because of that, we're able to kind of use PCR and more applications. But that's just a little bit of an example of what we're doing and how we've been able to kind of enhance our impact over time as a lot of those technologies have become more sophisticated.
So, a big part of this conversation is getting better beauty products into the hands of people, right? And that starts with retailers. I know that your products are available at Ulta Beauty. And so, I'm curious in working with Ulta Beauty, what makes their approach to clean and sustainable beauty unique to them versus other retailers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think a few different things. What I really respect about the program is that it's not just about clean, but it's also about sustainability. And it's really kind of merging two and prioritizing both. I think historically there was so much emphasis on the clean piece, but the sustainability piece kind of fell by the wayside. And I think in recent time, especially the way that Ulta Beauty has cultivated their program, I think that there is a strong push on both, which I think is really impactful and significant. I think one of the other things that's so unique about their program is that they're actually getting founders involved, and they're getting, the actual owners and operators of the brands a seat at the table to participate in those discussions. So I actually just recently joined the Ulta Beauty Conscious Beauty Advisory Council, and I'm so excited for that program to kick off because I think it's going to create a really awesome forum for brand founders and CEOs of brands that are on a similar mission to really come together and share perspective and ideas in a way that wasn't necessarily as accessible in the past. So I think that kind of inclusive participation of both the brand and the retailer is going to be a really powerful aspect of their program.
That's awesome. Rising tide lifts all boats.
That's right.
And so, in closing, I actually have a question for both of you. And, we just talked about charcoal. And so I'm curious, what's another classic ingredient that you don't think gets enough attention? Alex, I'll start with you.
Great question. I mean, I feel like there are so many classic ingredients out there that the clean beauty space really does very well and that I personally use day to day. One ingredient that I will highlight that I am having almost like a little personal renaissance with is rose water. I have started using rose water as a scalp toner, and I just will spray it on my scalp. I'll spray it on my face. I'll spray it everywhere. It's just kind of a multi-use DIY. I love rose extracts in general, whether that be, like rose fruit extract or a rose oil. And I just think it's a really beautiful ingredient that it provides the skin so many antioxidants and, depending on what extract you get, they have different overall benefits. But, it's rose is just kind of this like classic beauty mainstay that I am personally having like a little bit of a renaissance with. And, so I would say that's probably my answer. But, and hair care, I always look for something that has shea butter in it. I have really dry hair. I'm always going to look for products that highlight that. And then now that summer's coming up, You gotta say aloe. I mean, aloe is a great basis for a lot of fabulous products out there, and I definitely, keep that top of mind.
I love it. What about you, Nancy?
Yeah, it's so funny. The ingredient I was going to pick is also like a water ingredient, and that's actually rice water.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, but one of the foundations for healthy, strong hair is making sure that you have the right protein and moisture balance. And, oftentimes finding moisturizers is pretty obvious. You can pick your favorite oil and or conditioner, and that's going to give you some, hydrating, moisturizing properties. But a lot of people don't know how to solve, the protein part of it. And the protein is really kind of the building block for creating resiliency within your hair, which is the ability to resist, breakage from pulling or tugging. And that's where protein comes in. And growing up, one of the remedies that we used at home was a rice water repair treatment, which is pretty simple to make. Basically, taking rice and soaking it in water overnight and then straining out that water, putting it in a spray bottle and spraying down your hair. But because of that, balance that's needed because too much protein is not a good thing. Too much moisture is not a good thing. Making sure that you have that right combination is super key. And actually, a few months ago, we launched a Don't Despair Repair rice water protein treatment that has the balance of protein and moisture while leveraging one of these really essential ingredients from my childhood. So I would say I'm definitely fangirling over rice water these days.
I also feel like rice water is one of those or it's having a moment because of social media. Like, I feel like I kinda see
Yeah,
it pop up on TikTok every now and then. So, I definitely
completely.
think it's something that's coming into the zeitgeist, but it's also one of those, historically, it has a long, historical context for hair care and hair growth. So it's kind of one of those classic ingredients DIY moments that are, it's really coming back into the zeitgeist. I love that.
Completely.
And for me, as everyone probably knows, I know Alex, you know this, I spend more time in the supplement aisle than I do the personal care aisle. So my kind of old standard would be CoQ10,
Yeah.
which has been around forever. Most people think in the context of heart health, but oh no, CoQ10 is is about much more than heart health. Not only is it adjustable, you can put it on your body. And so that's mine. Mine's CoQ10.
I'm like really curious, Jason. Do you feel a difference when you use certain supplements?
Yes. Absolutely. Where should I start? I don't know if we have enough time on this
Yeah.
show, but
We might need another
absolutely,
podcast for that.
absolutely. And I'm a little bit I would say I'm on the a little bit obsessed. I get about 28 vials of blood taken twice a year
Mm.
to make sure everything I'm doing is working. With that said too, I take a lot of supplements, but I'm also always trying to pare down.
Mhm.
I don't wanna get to a place where I'm taking, you know, 25, 30, 40 capsule. It's just like, what am I don't want that. So I'm always looking at what I'm taking. Do I really need it? Can I pare down? And so, but the answer is yes. When there's a feeling attached to some supplements, there's no so like, for example, if you're taking a multivitamin, there's generally not a feeling attached to it. For some, there might be if they're low on B vitamins, it may feel like a little bit of an energy boost, but generally you're not going to feel anything. But if you're taking, hemp for anxiety, you'll feel something, or something for sleep, like our sleep product, you'll feel something. But it depends if there's like a feeling or not attached.
Yeah. I mean, some supplements you take and, with like obviously like beauty supplements, it's like you're supposed to have an aesthetic difference. And
Yes.
some have like mood altering and some are just help you get back to baseline, feel normal. I think that's when I noticed that they're working. I'm like, oh, I feel like an actual human being.
Yes. Yes. Nancy, thank you so much. We love everything you do. And thanks so much for taking the time. And Alex, we're going to have to do this again. Thank you for being my co host
You
and my
bet.
co pilot on this one.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's so good to chat with you about all things beauty. I love your
Likewise.
perspective on all this stuff. So
Thank you so much.